Hey guys, how's it going? Jason Sensational here, welcome back to the channel. So it's been a little bit of a while since the last video, I think like 2 days or so, which is a little bit of a stretch on my channel, but I just want to talk about a few things that's sort of been going on in the meta, just give a quick update about where I'm at, if you guys are interested. Mostly it's just going to be airing out some of the complaints, I guess, about some of the decks they meta. Namely, Kaisa. Bard still has some lingering problems in just how it works, but honestly, a little bit more bearable than what we have with Kaisa right now. And let's just jump into it. So this is probably Kaisa's probably the most played deck right now, split across Kaisa Auction, Kaisa Sivir, Mono Kaisa, whatever it may be. Bard trails at a very close second, and it's probably the deck that you hear the most people sort of complain about when they're talking about why the meta feels bad. And I do agree, albeit I have been playing a deck that I feel like deals pretty well into Kaisa, or at least I feel like it does. So to me personally, I haven't found it that much of a problem, but when it comes to playing anything outside of the deck, if I play anything that's like not good into Kaisa, or if I try to be good into Kaisa, it all feels really bad. And let's really just talk about why. So for those of you who haven't caught on the train quite yet, this is what Mono Kaisa looks like. It aims to turbo out Kaisa's Evolve with a bunch of cards such as Voidling, Ranger Resolve for Tough, Spell Shield from Elder, Lightning Assault, Scout, Challenger, Bright Steel Protector for Barrier, Sharp Sight, which is still a bug, but Sharp Sight for that can block Elusive, versus for Fearsome, Supercharge for Overwhelm, Spell Shield, and etc. What this deck does phenomenally well is level Kaisa on turn 5, because it's so consistent to not only level it, but also have it by turn 5. You have 3 copies of Rite of Calling, and of course you have 3 copies of Kaisa, which makes your ability to draw Kaisa by the turn you need it, which is usually turn 5, you have token, very, very strong. And if your opponent can't deal with it, you just go Kaisa into supercharge into attack. Maybe you have a Valor on board, and you have this scout attack where you essentially win the game. And it's very frustrating because, well, Shurima has always had these sort of issues when we're concerning how interaction works against them. And I believe this is something that I've complained about a decent amount. Had problems with why I didn't like Shurima, why I didn't like Thralls, for example. Thrall's a little bit less, but Thrall's works in a slightly different manner. Why I had problems with Mono Shurima, why I had problems with Bard and things like that. It's all this sort of idea that interaction just feels less rewarding to really play, and there's a few problems with that I do want to point. The first, of course, is Hourglass. This is a card that I've talked about many times on this channel as a card that I think is just fundamentally too powerful in what it does, because this is basically deny for 2 mana. It stops Vengeance in its tracks, it stops Ruination in its tracks, it stops any sort of heavy removal. Concerted Strike stops in its tracks. And it just does really, really good, because even if you play this defensively on your attack turn, you're still getting out so much of value from your opponent that you still have so many threats to follow up, and your opponent often has to like be 2-for-1ing into like Hourglass. For 2 mana, this card has always been too cheap, and it's something that I honestly would wish to see at least 4, but that's probably pushing slightly. The next really is just surrounding Kaisa. So why is Kaisa, why does Kaisa diminish the, so why does Kaisa diminish the value and importance and not reward players from removing Kaisa? Because Kaisa, there are many decks that can remove Kaisa on turn 5, or at least be able to interact it with some manner. You can play like Will of Ionia, you can play Vengeance, play Concerted Strike, you can play Tentacle Smash on turn 5 with their Kaisa, and if they don't have Hourglass, you can kill it. Now, of course, Kaisa's coming down as a 6/6. Maybe you can give it Tough, maybe you can give it Sharp Sight if you don't have Hourglass. So many ways of protecting it, and when it comes down on curve, it's still relatively big. But even outside of that, say you have Vengeance, say you have Tentacle Smash, say you have a for sure way to kill Kaisa. Why does that removal not get rewarded in a way that normally you would? And that really comes down to second skin. Because even if Kaisa is not killing you with a supercharged second skin on the turn it is played on turn 5, the second Kaisa most assuredly will cause you even more problems. Because even if Kaisa is removed, you can still play supercharge plus second skin onto another unit that you control, and then the next Kaisa is going to come down with Overwhelm, down with Spell Shield. Maybe it even comes down with Scout plus Challenger, or maybe just comes down with Challenger, any other combination of keywords, because you're able to play the second skin card even though Kaisa is no around. And this is sort of an interaction that is pretty much exclusive to Kaisa. If you try to like use Victor, you can't play the Augment card after it dies. If you play Tom Kench, you can't play the Tom Kench card after it gets bounced or replayed. It just doesn't really work like that. And Kaisa is sort of unique to that sense because she has this ability to just grant Kaisas everywhere and other allies positive keywords. And of course, this makes some forms of removal worse because cards like Will of Ione, if you remove the spell shield and then you bounce it, they can simply replay it with spell shield. But for cards like Vengeance, say remove the first Kaisa, the second Kaisa is still there as a problem, and now you're going to spend more resources, maybe even 2, because you need a Vengeance Vile Feast, for example, spell shield, and then kill Kaisa. And this really just makes it a really big issue, even if you are able to remove Kaisa, because not only do you have to remove Kaisa, you pretty much have to close out the game before the next Kaisa comes down. And right now, there's really not a lot of decks that can both remove Kaisa and end the game, unless they're also doing some other sort of beatdown strategy of their own, which is sort of pushing this meta into what you see now. You have a lot of Bard Alawi decks, or just any sort of Bard deck that stat bullies, and then you have Kaisa that sort of stat bullies as well, but in a more combo-oriented I kill you sort of manner, rather than I beat you down over the course like 5 turns and all my units are just unkillable sort of manner. Hard really see. So to me, Kaisa just makes having any sort of interaction just feel less meaningful, because even if you are able to kill Kaisa, again, I'm just reiterating, I guess, just to summarize, having the ability to second skin after Kaisa is removed is still very powerful, because of course, again, you do have Rite of Calling in Shima just to find more copies of Kaisa. So even if Kaisa dies on 5, you might have another Kaisa in hand. You have 3 more Kaisas in deck with the Rite of Calling, and the ability to find a second Kaisa is so easy that the second Kaisa is a lot harder to deal with, not to mention that now you have more mana for Ancient Hourglass or Rite of Negation, and all of a sudden, if they're Vile Feasting into Vengeance onto stack to remove Kaisa over Rite Negation or Ancient Hourglass, that's even worse for the person with the removal, because now they're burning 2 resources and not even popping Spell Shield, and then of course they're not even removing Kaisa. So to me, how I would like to approach Kaisa is to either make second skin not castable unless Kaisa is on field, so that the second Kaisa has to sort of start all over again, which makes having interaction rewarded, because if you can remove Kaisa immediately, then you are rewarded because the next Kaisa has to sort of start, sort of like Victor in a sense, but just, just more broken. The next option is to make second skin like a slow speed spell, so that when you try to play second skin, you can interact meaningfully with the target that is trying to aim at, and if you can remove that, then at the very least you stall a turn for the opponent. Or if they try to Ancient Hourglass the target that you are killing, then the second skin also just doesn't go. Although I think this is a little bit, I'm not sure if like it going to slow speed is necessarily better. Maybe it makes Kaisa feel too bad, but having the ability to just like focus speed supercharge and a focus speed second skin in order to give 2 units overrun plus spell shield is definitely very powerful, and just one way that Kai just absolutely dominates any sort of removal deck that tries to interact with it. So that's like the main issue with Kaisa. Again, the core cards that have really realistically always been a problem to me. Ancient Hourglass is a huge offender. It's so shocking to me that it's seen a lot of ways to dodge nerfs that I think when it comes to Shrima, this is one of the core cards I think of as being absurdly powerful for what it does. Rite of Negation, I still have my own gripes with it. I don't know why Shrima has a deny card of their own, but if they do, then it's fine, I guess. And then of course Kaisa, having the second skin being able to be played even if you don't have Kaisa on field in order to make your second Kaisa just a lot harder to kill. It's just very, very powerful in its own, even if you can't Kaisa. And not to mention, you know, 2 Void Abominations that come down that also end the game. This one I'm a little bit less concerned about, just simply because it is an 8 card. This deck can't cheat it out for 7 or 6 mana, such as like Winding Light turns. And, you know, if you're paying 8 mana for a finisher, then I think you deserve to, you know, at least have like a big threat. Not that it's not interacting with enemies either, because if they play this for 8 mana, they probably can't deny. Then it's down to Hourglass, and then you buy yourself a turn, and then maybe you're able to end the game on your attack turn. For 9, a lot of decks right now can definitely end the game for that, so I don't see this being as too problem. Although, of course, coming down with like Spell Shield, just make it a lot bigger of a nuisance. And you know, Spell Shield tough, then a lot of like the ping based decks that can't damage it to kill it also do suffer a little bit. But this one I'm a little bit less worried about because right now, realistically, you don't get this turn 8 most of the time. You get turn 5 into Valor, into Supercharge into second skin on Rise, then you just lose the game straight out. So I would really like to see this deck toned down a little bit more. If my proposed changes went through, then maybe you can't rely super hard on like trying to go all in on a combo. You can't set up a turn 5 OTK if you know your opponent has Vengeance, because then all of a sudden not really getting the value out of your attack turns. So then you have to like identify, or you have to start developing more threats, and then you have to play more for that turn 8 finish. So that was a really long, convoluted way in saying what I really want to see done out of Kaisa. But I will say Kaisa is just a pretty big problem when it comes down to limiting what decks can realistically play against it, which is mostly just other Bard decks that can stat bully, or just, I guess, really fast, aggro-y burn kind of decks. I could talk a little bit about Bard, but in the same sense that Kaisa plus Streama cards mitigate sort of the value of having reward, Bard does it very similar. And I've mentioned this beforehand in my previous video when I complained about Bard Poppy or Bard Dahlia, whatever the Bard demon was. And this deck is definitely a relatively big offender. Now, I will say that this deck does something really cool, this being Bard Alawi, being that it does really turbo level Bard through the spawn mechanic. And I think it is really cool because leveled Bard does pretty broke things, because once you have hitting chimes, now you're buffing your board, and now you're escaping the range of removal. But when you natty that 3 chimes on like turn 3 to 7/7 like C's voice, then there's really no removal that's on par to kind of stop it. Now, of course, this deck has the slight weakness of needing to attack or to kill your opponent, like this sort of relatively fair mid-range style of game plan. It just has bigger and more cheating sort of units. But again, the same way that cards like Ancient Hourglass and Deny and Second Skin sort of remove the value of removal, this deck does it in a slightly different way by making your removal at each certain time point in the game a lot less valuable. So turn 2 Mystic Shot is a lot less valuable when you have a 4/3 Beard. Turn 3, I guess Thermo Beam for 6 is a lot less valuable when there's like a 7/7 Seas Voice, for example. Now these are pretty like absurd examples, but say you want a Thermo for 3 on turn 3 against a 3/3, all of a sudden if that's a 4/4, your Thermo Beam is essentially negated in what it does. And that's really not up to the person with the removal, because they can't really play around that because not only is the buff random in what it lands on, it's also random in when it's on. And while I do think this whole idea of leveling Bard and using it as a tool to buff up your board is, I guess, a relatively fair and honestly kind of cool how that this deck does capitalize on. This deck is able to just turbo out Bard super fast. You can level Bard as early as like turn 5, and then from there on out, if your opponent's deck doesn't run particularly hard removal, like cards like Vengeance or Nation, you're only running cards like Mystic Shot, Get Excited, Thermo Beams. Those removal points become essentially worthless because all of a sudden your Bard is buffing units. It's like 6 health, 7 health, to 4 health, to 5 health. Whatever it may be for the mana point that you're spending, your opponent has to spend at least twice that in order to remove that. Not to mention that Bard spell, Traveler's Call, can sometimes just pull chimes out of your deck to put them onto stack, sort of mitigate that removal as well. And of course, cards like Eye of Nakaboros, when you draw 2 cards and you hit 4 times, and then it buffs a unit that's trying to be killed by damage removal, then that's really but again, I feel like this deck is slightly less of a problem when it comes to, I guess, mechanically how your opponent can interact with this deck compared to a deck like Kaisa. I still think this deck is super powerful because it does do relatively broken things. But that's not to say that this deck is less interactive in a sense. You still can, it's very reliant on in-combat damage to kill you. It doesn't have spell shield. It doesn't have any way to protect their units outside of having a leveled Bard on board. So there is a lot of counterplay that you relatively can do against this sort of deck in order to slow down the gameplay and a lot easier for you to get that removal through. It's just that if they just hit a lot of chimes on, or they stack a lot of chimes on the same early unit, and they can play that out early, that's a lot of pressure that comes down. Chump blocking against a Bard deck is completely worthless if you can't capitalize on it with Scorcher's block. And if you're not specifically those Noxus Tempo based decks, then you're going to have a really hard time blocking down on your base or on bigger units that are overcost or overstated for their cost, which is Bard specialized. And of course, the build order has Rally now, so there's also that going. But theoretically, like, I like the concept of this deck. It's really cool how a Bard can flip and buff up your board. But I think that Bard is just a little bit too powerful in this, and is frankly needing some bit of a nerf. I'm not sure how I would best approach it. Some people have, you don't shuffle chimes until 3 or something like that. Beard or Esmus put a chime on the top 3 cards of your deck, like in Raid Yeti, for example. There's some bits here that you can slow down Bard a little bit more, but right now it's definitely just pushing the boundaries of pushing out stats too early, which is something that removal, again, is really bad at, and the only real good answer to other Bard decks is another Bard deck, because now you can just really stat bully them after turn. But what it really comes down to right now is just a lot of onboard stats. There are, a good amount of decks that have sort of come in, challenge them. I think like the TF Annie, this not Buildwater style deck, does pretty well against this Bard sort of style, and it does maybe okay into Kaisa. Like Ash Nox come back as an answer against Bard because Bowling Strike Alawi, but it's sort of like flippy into Kaisa. And there's like there's some other different Bard decks that have come into like sort of counter Bard Alawi, like Bard Shen, but then it loses to like Kaisa. Sort of like you want to be good into one, you're not great into the other, and things like that, which it definitely has affected me a little bit because I don't really want to play on decks that lose straight up lose Kaisa or lose the Bard. So I've been playing, I've been pretty much just playing my own Yasuo Katarina list. And something I do want to show up is I've been doing pretty well for it, just though I haven't really been playing it much or playing the game much at all. Like recently, I'm rocking a almost 80% win rate over 34 games. Also Katarina. You can see here I beat this Bard Alawi deck. I can beat TF Nami. I beat like Bard Shen. Over here I beat like this Kaisa Sivir deck. like I feel good playing Yasuo Katarina into Bard into Malawi because it feels meaningful to play and I have interaction against it. Cards like Windswept Hillock. If someone plays a turn 5 Kaisa on the attack token, I can at least stun it. I can at least play Windswept Hillock with it, and this guarantees that their Kaisa is stunned and they can't attack and end the game on that turn. And then if I have a Yasuo on board, it deals 2 Kaisa on the next turn, deals 2 again. Maybe I have Flock to kill off, or maybe that turn has bought me enough time to end the game. Or I have cards like Steel Tempest plus Palm. I have enough fast speed interaction against Spell Shield plus things in order to shut Kaisa down. I have Notify or Deny for their Cataclysm. There's a lot of answers that I do have against Kaisa in this deck that I feel pretty fine, comfortable playing, it relatively enjoying that sort of matchup. I do feel like there is action. But that's based off something like Windswept Hillock being a burst stun, which has, its own sort of like mechanical gripes with how it works, but at least it is a sort of answer against the turn. Is something a Will of Ionia against like the Bard decks, reset that chime buff, being able to Pinnacle, and of course having very cheap fast speed stuns, having denies for the rally and Riptide, so give myself a little bit of like, play against into the Bard decks. And it's some deck that I've really been enjoying playing. I'm right now on D2 with it. I've been streaking pretty well. Haven't really been playing the game that much because honestly I got a little bit enthralled into League of Legends right now. I just started off with that, but that's like a side story. So I'll probably try to hit Masters with this, but the issue again from your perspective is that if I'm just playing one deck, it's not really something I want to make YouTube of. I'll probably put out a Yasuo Katarina Masterclass sort of content video if that's something you're in, because I do have quite a bit of footage and I do think I have a lot to say about the deck. Just outside of that, I'll try to like record some more videos, but I don't want to like tank my rank either before I hit Masters. So I'm a little bit locked into what I really want to. I want to hit Masters. I don't want to play any other decks right now that lose straight up to Lowy or in Kaisa, and I sort of want to see those changes made. But I'm still enjoying playing the game as long as I'm playing also Katarina. And it's a little bit of a weird spot to be in because I'm not super, bashing on meta, because if I'm playing my one deck that I really like into these matchups that I feel okay into, of course I'm going to enjoy the game a lot more than somebody who has to play a deck that's bad into Kaisa, bad into. So that's sort of just state of thoughts of where I've been. I've sort of just been rambling for 20 minutes. So let me guys know how you guys feel, because I don't think we're going to see a actual patch, until maybe in like 2 weeks or so. I think this week bug fix patch if they're following cadence. So I'm not expecting too much out of it. There is something phenomenal, then I think they should see a pretty nice revitalization of content back to the channel. But for now, I'm a little bit hesitant. I want to hit Masters first before I can get off, but I haven't really been playing that much recently either, so I'll put some more time into this. But that's just sort of me from a YouTube perspective, from a game perspective, and just sort of an update on how it's been going if you guys aren't. But let me guys know how you guys are feeling about the decks. Maybe if there's a deck that you're finding success with against Kaisa and Lowy sort of tenants and meta, do let me know down below. And thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate the support as usual. Thank you guys so much.